There are two things to know before I tell this story. These events took place in the 1970s, in a third world country where justice is obtained with one's own hand and family, for better or worse, is unconditional. My maternal family, on my grandmother's side, is known in her town for having outbursts of anger, the kind that blurs vision and turns everything red, and a strong temper. No one in my family embodied these qualities more infamously than my great-grandmother, Mama Delia. Mama Delia was an implacable woman, violent with her words and her fists as well. With Mama Delia, my grandmother, her siblings, and later my father's generation, making a mistake, no matter how small, was a death sentence. Mama Delia was married to my great-grandfather, obviously, a magistrate of the Supreme Court of Justice of my country, and according to my father, a good man and highly respected by all. But the moment that he walked through the door of the house, his authority ended and my great-grandmother's tyrannical rule began. Nothing was done or undone without her will, and as you can imagine, my grandmother and her siblings resented her greatly. Mama Delia has been dead for 40 years now, but stories of her are still told at all family gatherings. They also say that everyone in my family, my grandmother, who if you knew her you would say I'm lying, she is a sweetheart, and her children inherited her choleric gene that comes out from time to time in an explosive and memorable way. My great-grandparents had 4 sons, but only one is relevant in this story. Jose, not his real name. Jose was the second and the most rebellious of them all, the one who could not stand Mama Delia's mistreatment, and he let her know it all the time. He was the only one who stood up to her, and consequently the one who suffered the most. It was when Jose turned 15 that he decided never again to let himself be mistreated or abused by her. And of course, Mama Delia had something to say about it. I don't know exactly the details, but something my uncle did that upset her deeply. Years before, Mama Delia would have responded with leashes and screaming, but since my uncle was already 15, he was taller and stronger than her mother. She had to resort to an alternative tactic. She decided to call a policeman to the house. And what was her instructions to the policeman? To give my uncle the beating of his life. That was the last day my great-uncle lived at his parents' house. But where I come from, family is the most important thing, impossible to escape. 4 years later, my great-grandparents had moved to their new house in another part of town. Next to them lived the Cordovs. The parents, normal people, but the son, Reuben, was another story. Reuben was about 25 years old. Reuben did not study, nor did he work or helped with household chores. I don't know for a fact, but I can imagine it. Reuben spent all his time and energy on 2 things: growing his muscle mass until he looked like an Andy and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and insulting my grandparents every time he saw them walking down the street. My dad couldn't tell me why. Maybe Reuben was just like that, or maybe Mama Delia said or did something to him at some point. I wouldn't be surprised either. What he did tell me was that Reuben's aggressiveness towards my great-grandparents was so extreme that he wouldn't even let them walk on his side of the sidewalk, claiming it was his. My great-grandparents never did anything about it. My great-grandfather had his first child at 46 and my grandmother at 36, so they were already old by then. And for some mysterious reason, they never told anyone what was going on with Reuben either. This is where Jose comes in again. His relationship with his mother was strained and conflicted, which did not stop him from visiting them every so often to see his father and his 3 siblings. That day, my great-grandparents were returning home, and of course Reuben's shouts, insults, and obscene rudeness were there to accompany them as they opened the door to their house. What he didn't count on was that Jose was arriving at the same moment and heard everything. The world went first black and then red. Like a worthy son of Mammadelia, Jose exploded. He lunged at Ruben 3 times. All 3 times, with a blow to the face, Ruben knocked him effortlessly to the ground. Faced with such a beast, anyone else would have abandoned the fight. Jose did not. Jose was used to the pain, the blood and the bruises that remained weeks later. Jose had lost his fear of confrontation years ago. Jose stood up one last time, under Ruben's insults and taunts, and charged him. I don't know how he did it. Perhaps Ruben had let his guard down, but he managed to land a kick on his opponent's shin. Ruben did not fall to the ground completely, but he was destabilized. Ruben did not know it, but he had already lost. My great-uncle climbed on his back, as if riding a mad bull at a fair, grabbed him by the head, and slammed him repeatedly against the pavement. The smashed face, the teeth scattered on the ground, and the torrent of blood were not enough for Jose. What he did next was to grab Ruben by the hair and drag him up and down the street, twice, until my older great-uncle stopped him. The story ends with Ruben in the hospital, his face unrecognizable and deformed, and my uncle disappearing for a week to avoid any kind of retaliation. Never again did my great-grandparents have problems with Ruben, although Jose's relationship with Mammadelia never improved despite what happened. Next story. I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate-type job in a field with lots of room for growth, and am recently back into the dating scene after a decade. I'm kind of a would-be a 10 if she lost 30-olds-looking girl, beautiful face if a bit chubby, but I never have issues getting a date lull. I'm not well off, but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large multicultural city, and my ex was an immigrant, so I'm open to dating people of any origin. If it wasn't abundantly clear, this bit about my appearance is a joke, and only speaks to his failure to select an appropriate victim. I don't care what people think about how I look. What happened? A few weeks ago, I met a very charming man from a Latin American country, only a couple years younger than me. Seemed very sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, educated, and in a good profession back home in his country, and had a lot in common with me. Chemistry seemed amazing inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa, but hoping to stay. I made it clear I wouldn't be able to help him with that, but we'd have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, only then would we consider a real relationship. Then the other shoe dropped. A couple weeks and 4 dates in, during a text conversation about my work, he asked me to be his sugar mommy. I initially laughed and assumed it was a joke. He kept pushing and clearly said it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask until I hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking he was serious about it. No apology for being hurtful to me. Obviously, what I did next was take screenshots and cry about it to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking he liked me and that he thought I needed to pay for a man. My friends started the fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more on his online presence. Together we found about 6 different Instagram accounts that were him using different variations of his name and different photos of himself, all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern, all very scammy and suspicious looking. He'd been foolish enough on one of his profiles, though, to follow and tag the employer that he was working for illegally on his tourist visa in my country. So I contacted another close friend in a local law enforcement agency that works with immigration. She looked up his file. He had a wife and daughter at home. I released the hounds after that. The friend who helped me investigate online made several group chats on multiple platforms with all of his family, immediate and extended, and friends. She released all the screenshots as well as a rant about how shameful it was. As they started blocking her, she added more people. I found his sister's phone number. She sent her messages on there too. Everyone he knows, including his wife, know he's unfaithful and trying to take advantage of women. 30 minutes after the online bombardment started, I got a rude message from him about how I should be smart enough to know he was joking and he doesn't need to sell himself. I didn't reply. Next step. Online immigration reporting form with all the info we found. Work info, employer name and address, his home address, full name, job, photos, screenshots admitting to working. Usually these reports take months to be reviewed, if at all, but I gave the file number to my law enforcement friend. 2 days later, law enforcement officers visited him at home. They found him with a phone number that was issued to a local resident. All his roommates also had numbers issued to the same person, a direct link to the employer. He received a caution for trying to scam me, a no-contact order and a flag on his immigration file that, based on his country of origin, will likely mean he can never return, as well as a strict warning to not work without authorization. His roommates also received warnings. His employer received a visit next. They found significant proof that they'd been employing him illegally, as well as multiple other people. Their investigation is still ongoing, but so far they are likely to receive tens of thousands in fines or possible jail time. The guy isn't getting deported because the government would have to pay for it, and proceedings take longer than his remaining visa time, but he's now upgraded from a flagged file to a multi-year ban on re-entry to my country. If he bothers me again, though, he will be deported as well. Next story. In my country, high school starts at the age of 15 and lasts 3 years. I was a year early, so I was 14. During the first weeks of school, a guy in my class, for the sake of this story, I'll call him Connor, approached me, and we started getting along to the point we quickly started dating. Little did I know Connor would become my worst nightmare for the next 3 years. He was 17 when we met, and just like a lot of guys this age, he was obsessed with doing it. He pressured me into having my first time with him, and he broke up with me right after I eventually gave in. After that, none of our next intercourses were consented. He was very manipulative and gaslit me into believing I wanted everything that was happening to me. It took me a while to understand what he was actually doing. In fact, I only got it after hooking up with another person at the age of 17. Before it finally hit me, he had his way with me more than 50 times. During our second year of high school, he made the mistake of forcing himself violently on my best friend. She ended up getting an abortion because of him, and I started plotting my revenge. Originally, it was supposed to avenge her, but it ended up working for me as well. I noticed that not only he would only approach the first years, even if he was 20 when I graduated, but he would also target the youngest girls among them too. He was repeating me how much more attractive I was at 14 than 17. So knowing that it was pointless to tell the police, because in my country, only 0.4% of all complaints of rape, where victims are less than 15 end up in a sentence, I ruined his reputation. I told every single one of his acquaintances that he was a rapist, and to protect my best friend I told everyone I was the one he had violated, which wasn't really a lie. The rumor spread like wildfire, and after a few days, even the teachers were looking at him with disgust. He was isolated, and the only reason why he wasn't bullied was because he is 6'3", 190 tall. I could have stopped there, but I didn't. When we were third years, I knew exactly which universities he applied for. By snooping in Connor's bag, I found his application numbers. So using those, I contacted every single university he applied for and explained the situation, providing screenshots of his conversation with my best friend where he was threatening her with a defamation case if she attempted to press charges against him. She had sent them to me to rant about him, and I had kept them all this time. All of them thanked me, and he ended up not being able to get in any university. He had to repeat his third year because of that, in an establishment where everyone knew what he had done, and all the first years would know that they had to avoid him at all costs. The next year, since I wasn't there to foil his applications, Connor was accepted in a university that I hadn't contacted the previous year. Unfortunately for him, I ended up learning which university he was going in and repeated the same process. There were former students of our high school in the university he was going to who spoke up to the uni's mental health center about the inappropriate behavior he had with them and told them what kind of rumors there were against him. Since I had provided proof that the rumors were true, Connor was permanently expelled for the safety of the female students attending the university. So now he doesn't have a degree and nowhere else to go study, with no social life. His situation couldn't get worse, could it? Well, yes, I made it worse. Connor tried to move to another region where no one would know him and pass a diploma to work with kids. However, Connor is a phone addict and couldn't help but share on his social medias that he had passed his diploma and started working as an educator for troubled kids and preteens. Little did he know, I had created an account pretending to be one of his only remaining high school acquaintances, who I knew was chronically offline. With a bit of searching, I ended up finding his workplace and started the same process all over again. I also added a message he had left on my voicemail where he was panting while telling me how hot I was at the age of 14 and how he would have loved to go back in time just to fuck me again. Needless to say, they got rid of him really quick, fearing for the safety of the kids. I was planning on keeping reporting him to all the places he was planning to work to, but his previous workplace took care of that for me. I don't know how, but according to Connor's social media, they managed to get him blacklisted on a national level, technically invalidating his diploma. Due to this, he couldn't pay his rent anymore and ended up being homeless for a while before his mother accepted to take him back in. I'm friends with his older sister who knows everything about it and told the rest of the family what happened. From what she's told me, everyone cut off ties with both Connor and his mother, including her. I'm still occasionally stalking his social media to see if he's trying to get back on his feet. The last time I checked was today, right before writing all of this. So raping two people ended up isolating him both socially and from his family. As long as I'm alive, he has no chance of ever getting a girlfriend. He lives in the region where he spent his high school years, so no one would hire him even as a cleaner. And he even spent some nights in the street. Honestly, at this point, it's impressive that no one tried to harm him physically, make him go through what he made me and my best friend go through, or even end his life. Go to hell, Connor. And trust me when I tell you that you'll have to wait for me to die before even thinking about starting to have a normal life.